We don't know even if welfarism wins you elections or not. It's a complicated dynamic what wins you election, but there's one thing which definitely loses you election. It's inflation.
In India, right, you're seeing a opposition which may be getting a little bit more popular than we kind of, just the rhetoric of the opposition getting a little more catchy and popular, which is taking more hard left turns than it did in a long time. I mean, you're talking, Rahul Gandhi is talking caste, Rahul Gandhi is talking a lot more welfare. He always spoke welfare, but he's still talking. Are they kind of just like sensing what the audience wants to hear?
I think the opposition is doing what the opposition always does, just which is to be anti-government. So whatever the government has, it is. When the opposition comes to power and how they govern is very different. Yeah. As I've said, that if you look at the state chief ministers around the country, including the Congress chief ministers, I don't think that they're following these kind of policies in practice, right? So I discount what is said by the opposition in power. Having said that, there's no doubt that, as I answered to Mr. Kamath also earlier, that we will never carry out the kind of reforms that China or East Asia did. There's no constituency for that. But am I getting too spooked by what the opposition is saying? Not really, because I've lived through too many cycles in India to know that what they say in opposition and what they do in power is often very different.
But welfarism is something which every political party is actually racing, competing with one another for.
Yeah, it's a creeping issue as far as here is concerned. And as I said that, I have lots of issues with the government, which I've been very vocal about on the politics and stuff. But the one good thing the government did over the last 10 years, I will say, is that they at least shifted the balance a bit, which is the balance between, 10 years ago, welfarism was getting out of control, right? But they shifted the balance back a bit in terms of more infrastructure development and less on welfarism for the last 10 years. But it never went away, but the balance got shifted. The risk I took, if I were to identify the single biggest risk to the India story for the next 5-10 years, it's this, which is that every single successful economic nation at this per capita income has spent more on building infrastructure, giving people the tools to go out and do jobs. China did that. And the countries which prematurely built a welfare state in Latin America, Brazil, Mexico, all these places, they never took off and their growth rates never did. So the examples are very clear, and the single biggest risk to the India story over the next 5-10 years is if this trend reverses back again in terms of that. So there's no doubt on that. My hope, though, is the fact that it's always in India, getting anything done takes its time. It's all very slow moving and stuff. And the one thing which at least the first UPA government was very lucky about, that they came to power, they spoke about lots of welfarism and stuff, and they did it. Luckily, our growth rate, because of the global emerging market boom, was so strong, they could afford it. That in terms of that, they could afford to get away with it. By the second term, when the growth rates across the world began to collapse and even ours began to slow down, we paid a huge price for that. And remember one thing which I think that politicians in India know. We don't know whether economic growth wins you elections or not. We don't know even if welfarism wins you elections or not. It's a complicated dynamic what wins you election, but there's one thing which definitely loses you election. It's inflation.
Right.
No government has won an election in India when inflation's been high. And so therefore, I think any government needs to realize that if you do too much of this and inflation starts to get out of control, that's the death knell.